Ready to start whenever you are.
Very good. Are there any pre-trial motions?
No motions at this time, Your Honor, but do we have permission to make appearances?
You do. Go ahead.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Josiah Jones, and today I'm joined by my co-counsel, Mr. Dylan Darwish.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Together, we represent the people of the United States.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. My name is Divya Kumar, and I, along with my co-counsel, Mr. Paul Jorgensen,
Good morning, Your Honor.
represent the defendant, Mr. Blake Crosby.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. Are the parties ready to proceed?
Just a few housekeeping matters before that, Your Honor.
Very good.
First, we'd like to note for the record that we have prepared a binder that contains all relevant documents for today's case. Permission for my co-counsel to come up and tender that to the bench.
Any objection?
None, Your Honor.
You bet. Thank you very much.
If I could direct Your Honor's attention to the pretrial order. Specifically stipulation 19.
The court has reviewed this.
Understood, Your Honor.
Is there anything you should like to bring to my attention?
Yes, Your Honor, stipulation 19. We'd just like to note for the record that since we are charging the defendant with murder, we'd like the court to note that the defendant did sit down for a voluntary interview in which no Miranda rights were. Next.
I see that.
Yes, Your Honor. Next, we'd like to ask the court's preferences as it relates to approaching the witnesses, opposing counsel, approaching the bench, and moving about the law.
No, I think I prefer that as provision.
Yes, Your Honor, understood. Next, we'd like to invoke Rule 603. We expect 2 witnesses to testify today, and we assume that they were constructively sworn before trial.
There, any objection?
None, Your Honor.
There's constructive sequestration.
Just to be clear, Your Honor, we have 2 witnesses who are party representatives in today's case. We don't expect them to be sequestered, but we would like them to be sworn under 603.
Very good. We will swear the witnesses when they testify.
Yes, Your Honor. The final matter from us, Your Honor, is that we'd like to assume that all objection arguments are heard outside of the earshot of the jury. Is that okay with the court?
That is satisfactory. Yes?
No objection, Your Honor.
With that, Your Honor, we're ready for opening statements.
Very good. Anything further?
And
Yes?
no, Your Honor, defense is ready as well.
Very good. Let's begin. Prosecution, you may begin.
Yes, Your Honor. Hey, please court. This defendant took a life to stop a vote. It's July 4th, 2022. And Thomas Capello is on the ground. Not breathing. He's dead. See, just moments ago, someone decided to kill Thomas Capello as he was addressing the nation. Because Thomas Capello was a political candidate, a presidential candidate. And today you're going to learn that the person who pulled the trigger, ending Mr. Capello's life, well, that was this defendant, Blake Crosby. Because today you're going to learn that the defendant and Mr. Capello, they had opposing political views. You're going to learn that Mr. Capello, he wanted to actively defund our military. And this defendant, a former service person, wasn't going to let that happen. So you're going to hear what he did. You're going to learn that he walked up to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel, wearing all black clothing, with a sniper in hand, and he set up. And as soon as Mr. Capello opened his mouth to say a word, he was dead. This defendant took a life to stop a vote. And it's for that reason that we, the government, are here charging this defendant with murder. What that means, since we're bringing the charges, we bear the burden of proof to prove every element of our charge beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a burden we embrace. We're going to meet it by proving to you that this defendant, Blake Crosby, was the person who killed Thomas Capello, and that he intended to do so. We're going to do that by showing you 3 things: his means, his motive, and his opportunity. So let's start by talking about this defendant's means to commit this crime. Because you're going to hear that he was a former service person, spent 8 years in our military. You're going to hear that he was a sniper, that he has all the experience necessary to kill Mr. Capello. But more importantly, you're going to learn that on April 5th of 2022, this defendant got a list of the exact dates that Mr. Capello was going to be in Philadelphia. And he booked flights on that very day because he was planning this crime. Next, we're going to talk to you about the motive, because you're going to hear about those opposing political views. We're going to call up a Secret Service agent today, the person who was assigned to keep Thomas Capello safe. She's going to tell you that Mr. Capello actively advocated for the defunding of our military. And she's going to tell you how this defendant felt about that, because you're going to get to see, a tweet that he posted online, saying that Thomas Capello was a threat to our entire nation, that as long as he is breathing, none of us. Then we're going to show you the opportunity that he had to commit this crime, because you're going to hear about sworn eyewitness testimony that identified the defendant on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel just an hour before Thomas Capello was shot. You're going to learn that she picked this defendant out of a 16-pack lineup, had never seen him before. You're going to learn that she was 100% confident that the person she saw was Blake Crosby. Members of the jury. Today, you're going to learn that this defendant took a life to stop a vote. It is important that in this country, we have a say in the people we elect to office, that we have a say in the people we choose to represent us in spaces that we can't enter. But today, what you're going to learn is that this defendant took that right that millions of Americans should have had. He took the matters of that election into his own hands, and he took Thomas Capello's life. That's why at the end of today's trial, I'll stand before you again, and I'll ask you to return the only verdict that's consistent with the facts. Guilty of murder. Because this defendant took a life to stop a vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, counsel. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Jones, members of the jury, may it please the court. They chose assumptions over answers. Mr. Jones just came before you and he described the circumstances of Senator Thomas Capello's death, but I want to take you back to that exact July 4th, 2022, 1:47 p.m. In front of a crowd of thousands in broad daylight, a shot rings out and the senator drops to the ground. 38 Secret Service agents and 70 local police officers watch as the crowd erupts into chaos. It's the man that they were required to protect was dead. So with 100 trained police officers at the scene, investigative professionals, they assumed that they would be able to find the person responsible. With the pressure of public opinion and widespread panic, they knew that they needed to make an arrest, and they needed to do so quickly. So instead of performing a thorough investigation, instead of looking for answers, they chose assumptions. And for nearly a year since, they've continued to choose assumptions over answers. Doing so, the prosecution has brought a charge of murder against my client, Blake. That means that they've taken on the highest burden in our legal system beyond a reasonable doubt. That means that they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Blake Crosby committed this crime. But they won't be able to because they've chosen assumptions over answers. But while the prosecution has continuously failed to bring those answers, members of the jury, I promise you're going to follow that oath that you took, that promise you made to me, to Mr. Jones, to the judge, to each other. You're gonna follow law. You're gonna find the answers. That's why throughout this case, I want you to hold in your head three questions. Three questions that the government won't be able to answer. First, who could have committed this crime? See, just like Mr. Jones was explaining, you're going to hear that this was a controversial candidate, both beloved and hated by millions of people. You're going to hear that he was bombarded with hate mail, with death threats, and that on the day of that rally, there were over 1,000 people to protest his platform. You're also going to hear that at that Sonesta hotel that Mr. Jones mentioned, the hotel where the government claims the shooting occurred, the very top floor, there were over a dozen guests. Despite this, the Secret Service, the FBI, and the prosecution, they failed to investigate those suspects fully. And they continue to choose assumptions over answers. So second, what actual evidence does the prosecution have? Because Mr. Jones came before you, he told you that they were going to present proof beyond a reasonable doubt that my client did this, but I want you to pay attention to what specifically ties Mr. Crosby to the government's version of events. Because you're going to learn that the only piece of forensic evidence linking Blake Crosby to Mr. Jones' story is a cigarette butt. Members of the jury, all that's going to prove is that Blake Crosby smoked a cigarette at his hotel. What you're not going to hear is any forensic evidence linking him to the gun. Any forensic evidence proving that he even had the gun. Members of the jury, you won't see that gun at all. Because the government doesn't have it. So third, where was Blake Crosby on July 4th, 2020? As Mr. Jones insists that he was at the top of the Sonesta hotel during that campaign rally. You're going to receive the sworn testimony of an eyewitness who saw him in the crowd. Mr. Crosby will take the stand himself and tell you he was standing in front of the stage, and you're going to see that from that vantage point, it would have been impossible for him to take this shot. You're going to see that there is no way that he could have killed us. Here, you should choose assumptions over answers. But with all of that being said, I want to make one thing clear. We're not saying that the Secret Service or the police officers are responsible for the death of Senator Capello. Rather, the person responsible is the person who pulled the trigger. That person is not Blake Crosby. Yet, for over a year, Mr. Crosby's life has hung in the balance, and today he's here waiting for the final. He's only here because the prosecution chose assumptions over answers. That's why at the conclusion of this trial, I'll come back before you again. And I'll ask that you find Blake Crosby not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Prosecution, you ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor. May we call our first witness?
You bet.
The government calls Agent Divya to the stand.
Agent Levico, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth and whole truth? You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Agent.
Good morning.
Would you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Of course. I'm Agent Divya.
What do you do for a living?
I work in the Secret Service for the United States government. I'm the head agent for the protection unit of the Secret Service.
How long have you been working with our Secret Service?
I've been with the service for a total of 21 years at this point, and I've been in my specific unit, the protection unit, for the past 8.
What qualifies you to be a Secret Service agent?
We had to go under extensive training before we could qualify for the service. During my training, I learned how to conduct criminal investigations, and specifically, I learned how to investigate whether or not political candidates may have been targeted in specific crimes.
Jumping off that point, Agent, how is it that you're involved in today's?
Right. So I was assigned to be the head protection agent over Tom Capella. I was present at a political rally that he held on July 4th, 2022.
Could you tell the members of the jury who Tom Capello is?
Tom Capello was a political candidate. He was a third-party candidate running for office, and I was present at his rally last year.
To see what happened, Mr. Capello?
I did. I was stationed near the stage during that rally. Mr. Capello walked onto the stage. He began speaking, and in about 2 minutes into his speech, a gunshot was fired, and Mr. Capello collapsed onto the stage.
Ma'am, were you here just a moment ago when Ms. Kumar gave her opening statement? When she said that your investigation chose assumptions over answers?
I did hear that, sir.
Well, ma'am, I want to talk about how you actually conducted your investigation. What steps did you follow to conduct that investigation?
Of course. So once we determined that Mr. Capello had been shot, our first step in the investigation was to determine where the bullet came from. And so we looked at the exact angle that bullet had entered Mr. Capello's skull to determine where the shooter could have been positioned.
Did you find any places of interest?
I did. So based on my initial investigation, we determined that there were 5 nearby locations that would have allowed the shooter to stand in a position where he could access Tom Capello.
How was it that you narrowed down those 5 locations from where the shooter could have been?
Of course, me and around 40 other agents began our investigation of those 5 locations, but we only found that 1 out of the 5 had evidence that a shooter had been there.
What evidence is it that you're talking about that indicated that the Sonesta Hotel, or excuse me, that the Sonesta Hotel was the place that that shooter fired?
Right, so that's the Nesta Hotel, sir. There was an eyewitness who saw someone walking onto the rooftop of that hotel under an hour before that shooting occurred.
Would you be able to recognize the testimony of that eyewitness if I were to show it to you in court?
I think I will.
If you can use that exhibit binder in front of you to flip to exhibit 17, and just let me know.
And then,
What are you looking at now?
so this is that witness statement we were just talking about, and specifically this is from a hotel manager at that hotel we're discussing.
Fair and accurate copy of the sworn testimony given by that eyewitness?
It looks like that.
Your Honor, we offer exhibit 17 as evidence pursuant to stipulation or objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
It'll be a bit.
So ma'am, when you reviewed the sworn testimony of that eyewitness, what exactly did you find telling us that the Sonesta Hotel was the place where that shooter fired?
Right, so this eyewitness reported that about 45 minutes before the shooting, they saw an individual dressed in a low cap and all black, walking up to the rooftop of the hotel.
Were they able to identify that person they saw wearing all black, trying to gain access to the rooftop of the Sonesta?
They were, so of course I showed that individual 16 different photos of individuals staying near the rooftop, and that individual eyewitness pointed to the person that they'd seen.
Hold on, Agent, you're telling us that you showed that eyewitness a 16-pack lineup, so did you assume that the person who pulled that trigger was this event?
Of course not, sir.
How'd you come to that conclusion?
That eyewitness told me that one individual in that photo lineup matched the person he saw.
You see the person that that eyewitness identified here in this courtroom today?
I do. Seated at the end of that counsel table in a blue suit and a red top.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that this witness is just accurately identified the defendant?
It will.
So ma'am, in this sworn testimony, did that eyewitness state how confident she was about the person being this defendant, Lake Crosby?
Yes, this person, this eyewitness said they were completely certain that's who they saw.
Well, with that in mind, I want to talk about whether you found evidence of a means, motive, and an opportunity in today's case. Did you ever find evidence that this defendant had the means to commit a murder like this?
I did. And so I found that this defendant actually had military experience and specifically experience using a rifle.
Would you recognize that evidence that you relied on to come to that conclusion if I showed you? If you can go ahead and flip to exhibit 14 for me. What are you looking at there, Agent?
So this is this defendant's military record, and specifically it shows that this defendant served in the United States military.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of that experience that you saw?
It looks like it, yes.
Your Honor, we offer exhibit 14, specifically the first two paragraphs, the last portion of the paragraphs we have.
Objection?
Your Honor, if the entirety of the document, except for the first two paragraphs is included, then I have no objection, as long as we agree that everything else is redacted.
Counsel?
That's what we're offering into evidence, those first two paragraphs, Your Honor.
There'll be a bit. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. And so, Agent, from those first two paragraphs of that document, what did you see telling us the defendant's experience?
Right, so this document shows that the defendant served in the Army for 8 years, and it specifically said that the defendant won several sniper competitions while serving in the Army.
I want to talk about whether this defendant had the opportunity to commit this crime. Ma'am, what evidence did you have that this defendant was at the Cincinnati hotel?
Right, so of course I interrogated the defendant after we determined that he was a suspect. And the defendant told me that he was present at this political rally and admitted that he was mere feet away from the scene of the event.
Ma'am, we're here when Ms. Kumar said that Mr. Crosby was actually at the rally that day.
I did hear that, yes.
Were you able to confirm whether or not he was actually at the rally?
I determined that the defendant may have been at the rally earlier on, but then I found DNA evidence that confirmed that the defendant was at the scene of the shooting at the time that the shooting occurred.
Your Honor, to an improper opinion. If I may be heard.
You may be heard.
Your Honor, in order for this witness to offer an opinion under Rule 701, it has to be based on rationally based perception. None of the information that she just testified to gives a specific timeline of how she could use DNA and forensics to place a timestamp on when a piece of evidence, and consequently, when a person was in a specific location at a specific time. It's an improper opinion. It's not rooted in the facts and the data that she observed.
Yes, Your Honor. At this point, I believe that objection is actually premature. This witness hasn't actually testified to a specific time that DNA indicated. And if I may make an offer of proof, this witness is actually going to testify to a report created by the FBI and the analysis done on that DNA evidence. Her testimony will be specifically constrained to that already admissible FBI report. She's not going to make any unqualified opinions as to what time that DNA is like.
Response, Your Honor? Your Honor, the witness's testimony was that the forensic evidence proved that my client was at the scene of the crime during the time of the crime. That's why I raised my objection. The forensic evidence does not provide any sort of timestamp. This is an improper opinion.
She may testify, Agent Divya may testify about the DNA evidence, but in terms of when that evidence is placed on the object containing that evidence, I think that's a proper testimony.
Of course, Your Honor.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Understood, Your Honor.
Motion to strike, Your Honor.
Okay, it's granted.
Ma'am, you were telling us about some DNA evidence that you found. Did you conduct this investigation with the FBI?
I did. The FBI did an entire forensic report on that piece of evidence.
And would you recognize that report that the FBI created?
I will.
If you can go and flip to exhibit 16 for me.
And there.
You recognize what I'm showing you there?
Yes, this is that forensic report conducted by the FBI.
And would you recognize the DNA sample that they took?
I will.
Your Honor, I'm approaching the witness, or excuse me, permission to approach the witness, which was been pre-marked as exhibit 7,
Mission granted.
showing a present house. You recognize that, ma'am?
I do. This is the cigarette butt. This is the piece of forensic evidence.
We offer exhibit 16 and exhibit 7. Pursuant to stipulation, exhibit 16, we waived all objection.
I understand.
No objection, Your Honor.
So ma'am, what exactly did the FBI find in relation to that cigarette?
Right. So this cigarette right here was found on the rooftop where we determined the shooting happened. So the FBI conducted a forensic test on this cigarette, and they found that DNA evidence was present, and it was matching one specific person.
Who was that person?
That person was the defendant, and it was a 1 in 6.2 billion match.
Finally, ma'am, I just want to talk about whether you found evidence of a motive in this case. Can you flip through exhibit 12 for me?
Okay.
What is that, agent?
So this is a post that the defendant made, and more specifically, it's a post about Tom Capello, the man who was killed.
We offer exhibit 12.
Without objection.
Ma'am, what does that exhibit say about Thomas Capello's stance?
This says that the defendant wrote, Thomas R. Capello is a threat to every person in this country. As long as he is alive, none of us are safe. This is the time for the Patriots.
Thank you for your time today, Agent. Your Honor, at this point, I have no further questions. Permission to publish those admitted exhibits to the jury.
Thank you. Yes.
Your Honor, prior to beginning cross-examination, defense would enter exhibit 18 into evidence, and pursuant to stipulation 18, all objections to this document have been removed.
This is the affidavit of Gray Judge.
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objections to that, Your Honor.
It'll be admitted.
And permission to publish to the jury?
Yes. Thank you.
May I proceed?
You may.
Agent D'Amico, I want to start off by clarifying something you mentioned during your testimony, of course. Ma'am, you told us that you were the one who interrogated Mr. Blake Crosby, yes?
No, I reviewed a specific interrogation of the defense.
So ma'am, to be clear, you were not the one who questioned Mr. Crosby, yes?
That's right, it was an Agent Rod who conducted that interrogation.
So to be clear, it was not you.
Yes, that's correct.
Ma'am, let's take a step back and talk a little bit more about your investigation, starting with who could have done this. Of course, ma'am, like you told us, you were present during that shooting, weren't you?
I was standing watching as Tom Capello was shot.
And during your role as a Secret Service agent, you were responsible for reviewing that crowd.
I was.
You agree with me that there were thousands of people, weren't there?
There were. It was an entire political mob.
Ma'am, did you notice any protesters along with the supporters?
I did. The supporters definitely outnumbered the protesters, but I did see a number of people protesting the candidate.
And agent, you can't tell us how many of those in attendance were armed, can you?
Of course, it's our goal to make sure we keep track of any possible weapons, but I couldn't give you a number of people who were armed.
But ma'am, you can give us a number of how many law enforcement officials were there, right?
I can.
You were supervising 38 Secret Service agents.
That's right. There were 38 Secret Service agents in addition to about 70 local government.
Right, you had support from the Philadelphia Police Department, didn't you?
We did.
Ma'am, let's take a step back and talk a little bit more broadly about the numbers of this candidate. You'd agree with me that there were millions of people who loved Senator Capello.
As far as I could determine, Tom Capello did have a group of supporters. Yes.
You agree with me that there were millions of people who hated Senator Capello, yes?
Objection as to speculation.
Response, Your Honor?
Response.
Your Honor, I'm not asking this witness to speculate. I'm asking her to testify based on her perception as a leader of this man's Secret Service detail. She can absolutely testify broadly about the perception of a major presidential candidate. Not asking her to speculate into the mindset of millions of people. I'm asking her to testify to what she's perceived as somebody responsible for protecting this individual.
May I respond on those grounds, Your Honor?
Pardon?
May I respond?
Sure, sure.
Yes, Your Honor. It would be different if this witness was testifying as to her rationally based perception, what she observed, and how that led to her to interpret that millions of people hated Thomas Capello. But as the question stands, whether or not millions of people hated Thomas Capello, opposing counsel is asking this witness to speculate and delve into the mindset of those millions of people. That's speculation.
I'm going to grant the objection, but you can rephrase the question.
Yes, Your Honor. Agent, you agree with me that you know that there were plenty of people who hated this candidate, yes?
I reviewed as much information as I could about the candidate, and I saw that some people had posted online that they weren't supporting. So that's correct.
Well, man, people didn't just post online, they sent him hate mail, didn't they?
That's true.
They sent him death threats?
You're correct. Yeah.
Ma'am, you still have that exhibit 12 in front of you?
Yes, I do.
And that's the tweet from my client, Blake Crosby, correct?
Yes, it is.
Ma'am, you'd agree with me that prior to July 4th, 2022, you wouldn't have viewed that document as a threat, right?
In isolation, I think that's fair to say. But of course, once finding out all the other corroborating evidence for this defendant, finding this tweet confirmed that he had motive to commit the crime.
But ma'am, back in July of 2022, this evidence wasn't explicit enough to concern you.
That's right. Without all that other evidence, this couldn't stand in isolation.
Ma'am, let's talk about what evidence the government does have. We heard a lot about your investigation, but to be clear, that cigarette butt in front of you, that's the only piece of forensic evidence that Mr. Jones has brought against Mr. Crosby, correct?
In terms of forensic evidence, this is the only clear match to the defendant. You're correct.
Ma'am, throughout your direct examination, Mr. Jones, he didn't enter any evidence of a murder weapon.
No, that's correct.
He didn't show the members of the jury the ammunition that was used.
You're correct.
He didn't tell the jury what kind of gun was used.
You're correct, but again, I determined that this piece of DNA evidence was in the exact location where we found that the gun had been used.
Agent, you didn't see any evidence that Mr. Crosby owned a sniper rifle as of July 4th, 2022, correct?
Not a sniper rifle, but I did determine that he had one registered weapon under his name.
You know he owned a handgun,
That's correct.
but you know that this shot was taken from 600 yards away, right?
Of course, yes. To be clear, he definitely did need and used a sniper rifle to commit this specific crime.
Ma'am, are you testifying definitively that he used a specific sniper rifle?
Ma'am, I do believe that this crime had to be committed with a sniper rifle based on the fact that it was so far away from when Capella was shot.
We don't have that gun here in court today, do we?
We do not.
We don't have the weapon with the ammunition that went in that gun act, do we?
We don't have the gun.
Thank you for your time. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No redirect for the witness, Your Honor. May she step down?
She may.
And permission to publish that cigarette to the members of the jury.
You may.
Your Honor, at this point, we have no further witnesses and we rest our cases.
Good. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Mr. Blake Crosby.
Mr. Crosby, raise your right hand. You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, not the whole truth.
Yes, Your Honor, I do.
Then testify.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good morning, my name is Blake Crosby.
Sir, you've been seated next to me throughout this trial listening, but I want to give you a chance to speak. Mr. Crosby, on July 4th, 2022, did you go to the top of the Cincinnati Hotel to kill Thomas Capella?
No, I did not. I was there in Philadelphia to attend the rally, and that's exactly what I was doing. I was there protesting, but I was doing it peacefully.
Sir, did you take a sniper rifle and some ammunition and go to the top of that hotel?
I don't own a sniper rifle. I haven't shot a weapon since I served in the Army. I served our country to protect innocent people. I don't want to kill them.
Well, so speaking of that, I want to give the members of the jury a chance to get to know who you are. Can you tell us where you're from?
Born and raised in LA.
What do you do for a living right now?
Well, ever since I stopped working in the military, honestly, it's been pretty rough. I've been having a tough time finding a job. I've really been working hard to against me. I work Uber, Lyft, I work at a local post office.
So you mentioned that you were in the military. Can you tell us a bit more about your service record?
I served for 8 years in the U.S. Army.
Mr. Crosby, a little bit about what evidence the government has. Sir, we've heard a lot about that cigarette butt. Is it true that you smoked a cigarette on that rooftop?
Yeah, that's true. I know it's bad for my lungs, right? But I am a smoker. I smoke about a half a pack of cigarettes every day. But I did not smoke a cigarette on that rooftop on July 4th. I was in the hotel and I smoked it the day before the shooting, not the day of.
So, sir, let's go ahead and talk about where you were on the day of.
Okay.
Where were you during July 4th, 2022, around 1:45 p.m.?
I was at the rally. I mean, that's the whole reason I went to Philadelphia, was to be there to peacefully protest a candidate that I did not support. I was there among the crowd, along with everyone else. People saw me there.
Sir, in that binder, can you turn?
Actually, Your Honor, so the last portion of that testimony, as to speculation, then Your Honor, this witness just testified that other people saw him there. He can't delve into other people's mindsets and tell us whether or not they actually saw him.
Defense, go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor, this defendant can absolutely testify as to whether or not he had interaction with other people and whether or not they may have seen them and seen him. We have no reason to believe that every single person around him was visually impaired. Based on his rationally based perception, the people he was with could see him.
May I respond?
You may respond.
Opposing counsel's proffer actually gets at the issue that I'm talking about. If this witness testified that he had interactions with other people, that would meet the bar of his rationally based perception. But telling us that other people saw him, that's speculative.
Response, Your Honor?
You may respond.
He explained that he was around and interacting with other veterans and that they saw him. He has laid enough foundation to determine whether or not they were able to see him standing in front of them.
I'm going to overrule the objection about the testimony.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Crosby, I want to talk specifically about what happened when you were standing in that room.
Okay,
Can you turn to the page in that binder marked Exhibit 4?
good forward, okay. I'm there, it's like the stage.
Mr. Crosby, is that the stage in Rittenhouse Square?
Right, that's where Senator Capello was at the podium, that's what, this stage here, that's where the event was taking place.
Does it appear to be a fair and accurate photograph of the stage?
Yes,
Defense offers Exhibit 4.
The objection,
No objection, Your Honor.
it'll be admitted.
Mr. Crosby, can you tell us where you were looking at that stage?
right, so you can see there's a large grass field here, and I was right around here, I was in the middle of the crowd, it's empty in this picture, but back then it was filled with people, supporters, protesters. I was there in the middle of it all.
Sir, on July 4th, 2022, did you actually see Senator Capello get shot?
I did. I saw him collapse. I watched his body drop on the stage. Look, I know I've seen people die before, right? I've served in the military, but it had been a long time. I didn't think I would see something like that ever.
Mr. Crosby, did you actually see the shooter?
No. I heard a gunshot, it was quiet. It sounded like it was coming from far away. I wasn't able to see the shooter.
Mr. Crosby, I want to clarify another thing that Mr. Jones has mentioned.
All right.
Sir, we've heard that you attended multiple campaign stops. Is that correct?
Right, Senator Capello was a political candidate that was actually against what I believe personally.
Sir, did you go to any other campaign stops before you came to Philadelphia?
Right, I think it's a civic duty to protest. I think it's a right as an American citizen to protest a candidate that has differing views. And I actually protested peacefully on multiple occasions prior to July 4th.
Do you remember where you went specifically?
In Boston, Massachusetts, different areas around the Northeast, there were 3 different events that took place before the July 4th event.
During any of those prior campaign events, did you ever want to harm Senator Capello?
No, I protect people. That's what I did for a living. That's what I devoted my life to protect and serve the people of the United States, to protect our democracy, to protect the freedom to vote. I would not undermine that. That goes against everything I hold near and dear to my heart.
Finally, sir, I want you to turn back to Exhibit 12. Can you tell us why you wrote those words?
I said he's a threat. This senator, he based his campaign on one stance. He said he was going to defund the U.S. military. Personally, I believe the U.S. military is what keeps the people in this country safe. I believe without a military, we aren't safe. That's exactly what I said.
Mr. Crosby, can you tell the members of the jury when you posted that tweet?
April 5th, 2020.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Crosby. I have nothing further, Your Honor. Have you published Exhibit 4 to the jury?
You may.
Your Honor, before I begin, do I have permission to approach the jury and grab a copy of documents to use throughout cross-examination?
Yes.
Yep.
May I proceed?
You may proceed.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
I have a question for you, and I'm looking for a number here, sir.
Okay.
How many times did you lie to the FBI as they were investigating you for this crime?
I think I know what you're talking about. The FBI, they asked whether or not I smoked that cigarette. At first, I told them I didn't smoke it.
At first, is that one time that you lied to the FBI, sir?
It happened during our interview. It's true, it's a mistake. I'm sorry.
Let's walk through exactly what mistake you're talking about that you made.
Okay,
Because you sat down for an interview with the FBI, correct?
that's right. They asked me whether or not I wanted to conduct the interview, and I said, yes, absolutely. I want to do so voluntarily, so I can save my side of the story.
And they asked you, did you ever go to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel?
Right, they asked whether or not I went up there on a smoke break.
You said no, right, sir?
Right, I mean, I was smoking a half a pack of cigarettes every day, all over the place, on the street, on the roof. Honestly, at first I said no, I'm sorry.
I
did
understand,
say
sir, but that's a no to my question. You said no, or excuse me, that's a yes. You answered their question with no.
I did, I do apologize for that, was a mistake.
That was a lie, right?
It wasn't true, it wasn't.
Then the police asked you one more time. So are you sure that you never went to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel, right?
Right in the moment, I said, I think I've been on the roof, but that's what I told him. I said, I didn't think that I smoke a lot of cigarettes.
So actually what you said was, no, never once in my life have I been to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel. That's cool, isn't it?
Right, the words I used, I don't think I've been up there.
It's a lie, isn't it?
I actually had been up there. They were able to provide evidence to say, you know, you have been on the rooftop, and it jogged my memory. It did.
That evidence you're talking about, the FBI confronted your testimony with conflicting evidence, didn't they?
Right, it showed me that evidence, and then I did remember that I had taken a smoke break, not just on the street, but also up on that rooftop on July 3rd, the day before the shooting.
So just a yes or no to my questions will suffice, and that's a yes. They presented you with conflicting evidence, right?
Yes, sir.
They told you that they had your DNA on the Sonesta rooftop, correct?
Yes, sir.
They told you they found a cigarette with a fingerprint on it.
Right, and touched the cigarette to smoke it.
They told you that.
Right,
And it was at that point that they told you they had a fingerprint and DNA at the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel that you changed your story.
right. I remembered that I had actually smoked it, not just on the street, but also up on the rooftop. The DNA is, I smoked it from my mouth.
So you remember that you actually were on the rooftop, right?
Right, and took a smoke break the day before the shooting. I was in the hotel.
So I want to talk about whether you had the means, motive, and opportunity to commit this crime.
Okay,
Starting with the means, sir, if you can flip to exhibit 14 for me,
okay.
and just let me know when you're there.
I'm here.
So you recognize that as your service record, don't you?
Right, dates of service, 2009 to 2017, 8 years service for the U.S. Army.
Sir, me and Ms. Kumar have actually agreed to just reference the first two paragraphs of that document. So just make sure you don't mention anything else, all right?
I promise I won't.
So you see in that document that you actually are a champion sniper, right?
Right, they had sniper competitions. That was my job, to oversee the people on the front lines, to protect them with the sniper rifle.
You've won the all-army sniper competition 4 times.
That's right, I'm proud of my accomplishments in the military. I received multiple honors.
You hold the record for the longest distance between a target and a shot, don't you, sir?
That's right, I was actually able to save 7 lives as my role as a sniper in the military. I received Silver Star.
So that's a yes, over 1,500 yards that you shot a target, right?
That's right, that's how far the shot was.
Safe to say, sir, that you have experience locking onto a target, right?
Right, when that target is a threat to the United States of America, absolutely.
Safe to say you know how to execute that shot.
Absolutely, my job was to make sure that terrorists to this country were killed, not innocent.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about this case, because you actually got to see the campaign stops that Mr. Capello had, didn't you?
Right, it was a candidate that I intended to protest, so I made sure to attend those events.
Go ahead and flip to exhibit 10, sir. Let me know when you're there.
I am here.
So you recognize that as the stops that Mr. Capello made as he was running for president, right?
Right, this is his campaign trip.
So you saw that on July 4th of 2022, he was going to be in Philadelphia, right?
Right,
That very day that you saw that Mr. Capello was gonna be in Philadelphia, you booked a flight.
I booked a flight to all of the events.
Want to talk about what else happened on that day and whether you have motives, or can you flip to exhibit 12?
Objection, Your Honor, facts not in evidence.
Wait one second. One.
Specifically, Your Honor, I just asked that Mr. Jones move the exhibit into evidence because he referenced specific details on it. Exhibit 10,
We're happy to do so, Your Honor. We offer exhibit 10.
without objection.
So there's no objection to spending.
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
And may we publish to the jury.
You may.
Sir, if you can go ahead and flip to exhibit 12 for me.
I'm here.
You recognize that as the tweet that you posted on April 5th of 2022, right?
That's April 5th.
The very same day that you found out those campaign stops were gonna be, where Mr. Capello was going to be, right?
Right, the day the presidential campaign.
So the day that you found out where Mr. Capello was going to be, you posted this tweet. Is that correct?
That's right.
You posted this tweet that says, Thomas R. Capello is a threat to every person in this country, right?
That's right. I don't believe the United States is as safe without a US military. That's essential to our country.
Like you told us on direct examination, sir, you said that idea is near and dear to your heart.
Near and dear to the hearts of everyone in this country.
And what you said to protect that idea was that as long as Thomas Capello is breathing, none of us are safe, right?
And I didn't use the word breathing. I used the word alive. Now, I recognize now I should not have used that word, but at the time it's a social media post. I did not want to kill this man. He's not a terrorist. He's a presidential candidate.
So let's be clear, your words were as long as he is alive, none of us are safe.
Campaign is alive as well. I did not want him to win the presidency. I didn't think that would be good for this country.
So finally, I just want to talk about whether you had the opportunity to commit this crime, because you heard earlier in court today, when we were talking about sworn eyewitness testimony, correct?
Yes, that's right.
You heard that we talked about a Harper Edwards, you recall that?
A hotel clerk is what I heard.
You heard that she picked you out of a 16-person line, right?
That's what I heard, yeah.
To your knowledge, sir, you've never ever interacted with Harper Edwards, right?
No, I've never interacted with that individual. I'm sure I had to maybe talk to him when I checked into the hotel, but other than that, I have not seen that individual.
You heard that she identified you wearing all black clothing?
That said, the person that she saw was wearing all black. I don't own those types of clothing. If you look, you would not find that.
That you had a drawstring bag, that's what she said, right? So,
They don't own a drawstring bag.
sir, it's your testimony that that eyewitness is wrong.
I did not attempt to access the room on July 4th. Yes, that eyewitness was wrong. I was at the rally.
She would agree with me that you actually were on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel before that assassination occurred. Yes or no?
July 3rd, sir, not July 4th.
Before Mr. Capello was killed, you had access to that rooftop, yes?
I smoked a cigarette.
Access to the rooftop, sir.
I smoked a cigarette on July 3rd. I don't own a sniper rifle. I didn't shoot him.
On the rooftop. Yes.
That's true.
Not further.
Any further defense?
No, Your Honor, may Mr. Crosby be excused?
You may step down. Defense, do you have any additional evidence?
No, Your Honor, with that, we rest our case in chief.
Very good. The parties appear to proceed to closing statements.
Yes, Your Honor, may I just have a second to gather a couple of documents?
Certainly.
Permission to approach the jury.
You may.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
May I please call? This defendant took a life. This stop. The vote. Public discourse, members of the jury. It is the bedrock of our country. For people to be able to express their opinions on political views, to civilly disagree with one another, it's what our country needs, it's what our country relies on. But when people decide to gun others down for expressing views that they disagree with, we have a right and we have a duty to hold those people responsible for their actions. Today you learned that this defendant, Blake Crosby, he killed Thomas Capello because he disagreed with his political views. He took Thomas Capello's life to stop a vote. That's why we've charged this defendant with murder of a political candidate. And I told you at the beginning of trial that that meant that we had a burden to prove our case to you beyond a reasonable doubt. And I told you that we embraced that burden because we were going to meet it today, and that's exactly what we did. Because we proved to you that this defendant was the person who killed Thomas Capello, and that he intended to do so. We did that by showing you his means, his motive, and his opportunity. So let's start by talking about the defendant's means to commit this crime. Because you just heard from the members of the jury, he spent 8 years in our military. Sniper, 4-time champion of an all-army competition, holds the record for the longest distance between a target and a shot, 1,500 feet. And if you're wondering why that's significant, because the distance between Mr. Capello and the Sonesta Hotel, it's only 600. This defendant had all the experience that he needed to be able to execute this crime. Not only the experience, members of the jury, but he knew exactly where Thomas Capello was going to be. Because we showed you that campaign stop, Exhibit 10. You'll have a chance to review that when you go to your deliberation. And you're going to get to see that on July 4th of 2022, Mr. Capello was going to be in Philadelphia. And you heard what happened the very day that this defendant found out that information. It tells you his motive for this case. Because that same day, that's when he posted this. He told you that Thomas Capello is a threat to every person in this country. As long as he's alive, none of us are safe. That's how he felt about this political candidate, members of the jury. That's how strongly he disagreed with his opinions. That's how strongly he wanted Thomas Capello dead. You heard what he did about it. Because we've shown you all throughout today's trial that this defendant had the opportunity to commit this crime. We showed you in 2 ways. We showed you eyewitness testimony. You heard from a person who works at the Sonesta Hotel. That sworn eyewitness testimony that you're going to get a chance to review when you're going to deliberations. You're going to get to see that that person identified this defendant out of the 16-person lineup. This defendant, who she's never seen before, never once spoken to, never once had an interaction with, she's able to pick him out of a 16-person lineup with 100% confidence. This defendant was at the Sonesta Hotel. But you don't just have to rely on the words of that eyewitness, because we showed you the forensic evidence that backs that up. You saw this cigarette. You heard that this was a 1 in 6.2 billion % match to this defendant. 1 in 6.2 billion, members of the jury. Make no mistake, that belongs to no other person. This defendant was on that rooftop. And like he just tried to tell you on direct examination when he was on this stand today, he tried to tell you that he smoked this cigarette on July 3rd of 2022. But members of the jury, I'd like to remind you, he lied. You have evidence that you're going to be able to review that he lied to the FBI. In fact, I asked him on cross-examination, how many times did you lie to the FBI as they were investigating you for this crime? You heard that it was twice. It wasn't until the FBI told him that they actually had evidence backing up their version of events that he decided to change his story. Do you really think that the first time he's going to tell the truth is when he's on the stand about to be convicted of murder? Because it's not. He lied to the FBI, and he's lying once again here in court today. Now, all throughout today's trial, opposing counsel has been trying to tell you that we've chosen assumptions over answers. But you'll learn that that's just not true. Because you heard from Agent Divya today. She told you exactly how she followed the steps of her investigation, how she got that tip from that eyewitness statement that you're going to get the chance to review, and how that led her to the Sonesta Hotel. You're gonna hear about that, you heard about that FBI investigation, and you'll get to see that report that they created, detailing that the only way this was possible was with a sniper rifle. The only person in today's case who has experience with a sniper rifle, members of the jury, that is this defendant. Today, we have proven that he had the means, the motive, and the opportunity to commit this crime. You'll learn that he took Thomas Capello's life to stop a vote. That's why at the end of today's trial, I'm going to get a chance to stand up here again, and I'll ask you to return a verdict that justice demands. Guilty of murder. Because this defendant took a life. Thomas Capello's life. To stop a vote. For your time today.
Thank you, counsel. Advice?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Jones, members of the jury, may it please the court. Throughout this entire trial, from the very beginning, the prosecution has chosen assumptions over answers. Because from the very beginning, Mr. Jones has been telling you that Mr. Crosby, he took a life to stop a vote. Members of the jury, what vote? When was it? Why was it so pressing that this senator needed to be killed on this exact date at this exact location? Was it a November election? What was this candidate polling at? What was the likelihood that he was going to win? The prosecution didn't show you anything. Prosecution failed to meet their burden because they failed to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt who killed Thomas Capello. That's because they continue to choose assumptions over answers. You'll remember that at the beginning of trial, I asked you to keep in mind 3 questions. 3 questions that throughout the entire trial, prosecution failed to answer. But I want to go through them one more time to show you exactly why prosecution chose assumptions over answers and why Mr. Crosby. Because first, I asked you who could have done this. You see, the reason why I asked you that is because Mr. Jones talked about the means, who had the capability. But all you heard today was that Mr. Crosby was a sniper. You didn't hear anything about what type of weapon he used or what type of ammunition he used because they don't have it. They didn't show you a murder weapon. They didn't show you a cause of death because they don't know what it is. And they failed to show you who could have done this. Members of the jury, that's not beyond a reasonable doubt. Pointing a finger at a person who has a military against a candidate who was known to have anti-military positions. So second, I asked you what kind of evidence they have. Members of the jury, just like I told you at the beginning of trial, the only piece of forensic evidence is right here. This single cigarette. And just like Mr. Crosby explained when he took the stand, he smoked it. He smoked a cigarette on July 3rd. He left his DNA and his fingerprints when he picked it up and put it into his mouth and left it on that rooftop. But they failed to connect this piece of evidence in any way to that murder and to my client because the evidence isn't there. They failed to show exactly why and how this proves his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Finally, I asked you where Blake Crosby was. Because Mr. Jones got up here and he talked a lot about that hotel room. You have her written affidavit when you go back to deliberate. See that she said that she saw somebody wearing all black clothing try to get up to that rooftop. Members of the jury, you also have Exhibit 18, the affidavit of an eyewitness in the crowd. You're going to explain that she saw Blake Crosby in the crowd that day, that she spoke with him, she interacted with him. You also saw Mr. Crosby's own interpretation of events. He explained that he was standing in front of this stage. He explained that in that moment, he saw the senator's body drop. He described the horror that went through his body when he witnessed this killing. Members of the jury standing in front of the stage. Blake Crosby could not have taken a shot from several hundred yards away. That's reasonable doubt. Because they failed to prove definitive, consistent. Blake Crosby went up that rooftop. That he took a sniper rifle, that he loaded it with the proper ammunition, that he set his sights on that candidate, that he aimed the gun, that he fired the trigger. They couldn't show you a single piece of surveillance evidence. They couldn't show you a single receipt showing that my client purchased that gun. A single receipt showing that my client purchased the ammunition for that gun. They couldn't show you that gun at all. They couldn't show you the ammunition at all because they don't have it. They're assuming that because a veteran smoked a cigarette, he must be a killer. That's reasonable. It's the highest word in our legal system for a reason, because it demands that you must be convinced, that you must be willing to convict without hesitation. That's the seriousness of this crime. The government has failed to meet that burden. So I ask that you go back to that deliberation room and you find a verdict consistent with the law. I ask because of the prosecution's assumptions, to find Blake Crosby not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Anything further from the board?
Rebuttal, Your Honor.
Sorry,
Rebuttal?
rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor. May we proceed?
Right.
Opposing counsel is right about one thing. We don't have a murder weapon. But as the judge is going to instruct you by the end of today's trial, it's your job today to look at the totality of the circumstances. Because it's not just that this defendant was the only relevant person who had the experience of a sniper to be able to kill Thomas Capel. It's not just that there's a sworn eyewitness statement picking him out of a 16-person lineup, a person she's never seen before. It's not just that he lied to the FBI about his whereabouts during that entire investigation. Members of the jury, it's backed up. He was there, there's no question about it. 1 in 6.2 billion. Today it's your job to determine whether the first time this defendant is telling the truth happened on that stand today. And I'll tell you for one, members of the jury, it's not. He lied back then and he lied again. Today you learned that this defendant took a life to stop a vote. We ask that you find him guilty of murder. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Anything further?
No, Your Honor, with that, the trial concludes.
Very good.